Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 4 stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. The Karma Stories podcast is published to all major podcasting platforms, and you can also read along on YouTube under our @Karma Stories podcast handle. Alright, on to the stories, let's jump right in. This story comes to us from a deleted account. Principal told me to instruct courses I was not trained to teach or look for another job, so I did. I've been teaching for 6 years, at my last school for 2 years. I have a BA in history and an MA in education. My principal and administrative staff pulled me out of one of my classes during an intense lecture I was giving and ambushed me in the hallway to ask and tell me I was going to teach international baccalaureate classes next year. For those unaware, international baccalaureate courses are intense classes for high school students that last from 1 to 2 years. These classes are intense, requiring what some teachers have said to be the time equivalent of a part-time job for them to plan and prepare, without additional pay and not part of my contract. For context, within the first 2 weeks of working at this school, I noticed the other side of the pendulum. The students with learning challenges were being pushed aside in order to achieve the principal's goals of becoming an elite IB school. I began advocating for these students and offered to teach co-taught class with a special education teacher in order to help these students achieve. It was a great success, seeing many of the former troubled students actively being engaged in class. And through the grapevine, I was told I was one of their favorite teachers since I got them. After the first semester, I heavily petitioned the staff to allow me to teach more of these specialized classes across my department. Here's the deal. There was no change in the curriculum, just in how I presented it to the shared class. Anyhow, the principal shot down my idea, but allowed me to continue with my lone class for the next year. Back to the present. After the ambush, I went home and talked it over with my wife. She is my rock, and understood that I was troubled with the additional task of basically adding an additional 15 hours of work a week to my schedule. She said, "Go with your heart." The next week, I scheduled a meeting with the principal. I told him I was unprepared to teach the IB course this year, but if he would give me this year to prepare the additional materials and create a curriculum, I would be good to go for the next. I also asked if there were any other additional classes he would like for me to put together to teach next year. He said, "No, teach this course next year or look for another job." I asked about additional co-taught courses for the shared students who were overlooked. He said they were not important. I reminded him, yet again, I was currently working towards my PhD in history in order to teach college-level courses in high school, so students could get a dual credit and a jump on college and tech schools. He laughed at me and said, I quote, "None of the additional education you've taken since you started working here benefits the school at all. No one cares." This took the wind out of me. I love teaching. All of the additional work, time, and effort spent away from my family has been in order to be a better teacher, a better example for my students. I told him I would need to think about this and quietly left the room. I took the next day off, spending time with my family and speaking with my therapist. I'm very lucky to have a wonderful support system. I went back to work after that, and there were a number of staff that spoke to me privately. They agreed what he said was shameful. They shared that I was not the only teacher he spoke to this way, from changing failing grades to passing, to having teachers sponsor multiple extracurricular clubs without pay. I went to my union rep and added my statement to his ever-growing pile of staff statements about the principal. I assured him I was willing to go to the school board, etc. Just give me a call. Yep, I decided I was done. I wrote the principal an outstanding resignation letter full of positivity and thanking him for the wonderful opportunity to work at his school and to have learned from his outstanding example of leadership. Did I also mention I forwarded the email to the entire staff? There was no way he could publicly respond negatively to my resignation, and he was furious. The majority of the staff knew what was going on. There were many smiles and fist bumps. I was told by the office staff later there were 5 other teachers that resigned, making this the biggest turnover in staff in a decade. The principal now has to go before the school board next month to explain what is happening at his school. I wonder if I'm going to get a call. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called LostAllDoubt86. It says, "Can you work in a low-income district? They are always looking for highly qualified teachers, and my school specifically makes room for making sure struggling students have every opportunity." OP responded and said, "That is the plan." OP, don't wait for the phone call. Don't give him any chance to escape this mess. Keep the pressure on. Write a detailed letter to the school board about all your experiences with him. Contact the other teachers who have left, and consider creating a letter that includes multiple signatures at the bottom. This is your opportunity. See it through to the end. This story comes to us from Manchuck. Sure, I'll make it louder for you. In my 20s, I spent my weekends as a soundboard operator for a local community theater. After all the mics were set up, it was pretty simple and I really enjoyed it. One actor made a request to be able to hear herself on stage. Now, before I continue, I need to explain how the soundboard works. Basically, there are 2 sets of volume controls. One is the fader, you know this as those sliders, which controls how loud that channel is going to be to the audience. Above those are a bunch of knobs which will direct the sound to other speakers. We use these to direct sound to the orchestra so the conductor knows where we are in the show, the dressing room so the actors know, and to some speakers pointed on stage, called monitors, which allows the actors to hear the orchestra. These fall into one of 2 groups, pre-fade and post-fade. Pre-fade means that the volume would stay the same level no matter what the fader was set to, and post-fade is just the opposite. We would pipe the orchestra into the pre-fade since there are not a lot of mics that can pick up ambient noise, band members talking for example. The monitors on the stage were plugged into the pre-fade channel. Once we set those levels, we never had to touch them, which made it easier to focus on what was happening on stage. Since this actor wanted to hear herself while on stage, it meant that I had to add her to that pre-fade channel. This meant that when she got on or off stage, I not only had to slide the fader down, but also turn the knob to avoid picking up what was happening in the dressing room. This was NBD, as I had time to make all the adjustments. However, she kept complaining that she couldn't hear herself, so I would make small adjustments trying to find the right balance. But each time she got off stage, she would say that it was not loud enough. One show, I had the volume up so loud that it made her sound very muted in the house since I had to turn her down in the house, and yet she still complained it was not loud enough. It was so loud that I went backstage but didn't even make it that far. It was so loud I heard her through 4 rooms with cement walls. That's when I came up with a plan. The next day, I set the monitor level at a reasonable volume. Let's say it was 10 o'clock on the dial. She complained again that it was not loud enough, so instead of turning her up, I turned the dial down to 8 o'clock. After she got off stage, I asked her if it was better. She didn't say it was worse, but she wanted louder. I turned it back to 10 o'clock, the level I wanted her at. After she got off stage that time, she exclaimed that it was just perfect and to keep it there. After that, I kept it at 10 o'clock and she never complained again. Was anybody else hoping that OP was going to make her backstage chatter available to the whole house? That could have been an interesting situation, especially if she was bad-mouthing OP when she went off stage. Another solution to a problem like this is to have a dummy switch on your soundboard, one that doesn't go to anything. It can be even labeled as DFN, as in does effing nothing. And when somebody asks you to turn it up, you turn up that knob. Of course, you make a big production of it, making it look like you're doing exactly what they request, and I bet you 9 out of 10 times, they'll think the problem has been solved. This story comes to us from Apprehensive Lurker 3. That time, Karen tried to bully another mom and got an eyeful. I, 33 female, unexpectedly gave birth 2 months earlier than my due date. Thankfully, baby and I are doing great and we've now made it home. As you can imagine, coming that early meant baby needed a rather long stay in the infant spa, NICU. Now that we're home and I've been able to process everything, I wanted to share a moment of malicious compliance that helped bring some levity to a really scary experience. One of the most important things for a baby, especially preemies, is skin-to-skin time, which is where mothers or fathers will be either topless or open their shirts to cuddle their infant. Baby struggled with jaundice, so our skin-to-skin time was very limited at first because of light therapy. We had been moved to a new location in the NICU right next to another baby and across from 2 others. A standard of care in the NICU is monitoring the baby's breathing, heart rate, and oxygen levels. These monitors look like an old school tube TV and are approximately 16 inches by 16 inches, and can display babies in other areas as well if the nurses need. So I'm new to this little care area and I'm getting ready to set up the hospital provided screen so I can get my skin-to-skin time, but realize I may end up blocking the monitor for the baby next to me from the nurse. I ask the nurse if she can still see or if my setup was blocking anything for her. Obviously, I don't want to interfere with the care of another patient. She tells me everything was good, so I settle in for some much needed snuggles. Not even 10 minutes later, I feel someone in my space and look up to see a woman glaring down at me. Once I've made eye contact, Karen starts in on me, while topless and holding baby, so very vulnerable, about how I'm blocking the nurse from caring for her baby. When I tried to explain I asked before setting things up, she refuses to listen and continues to lecture and gets more aggressive and angry about how I'm causing her baby to not receive appropriate care, and am pushing her out of the care area. After all the emotional stress and frustration of being in the hospital, I finally snapped, looked at the nurse, and told her to take away the screen. The nurse was horrified and started saying, "But your privacy," to which I replied firmly, "It would seem my privacy and modesty don't matter as much as Karen's comfort. Get rid of the screen." This pissed off Karen even more, as she realized she'd have to spend the next hour staring at my topless self. She got very annoyed and uncomfortable, especially when the doctors managing rounds both got flustered and tried to insist I get a new screen. I may have been the butthole, but I simply was done and stared right back and said, "According to my neighbor here, my privacy doesn't matter, so we all get to be uncomfortable. When I tell you if looks could kill, I'd be dead, I'm not joking." The doctors didn't want to deal with it, and the nurses who had to deal with it were laughing quite a bit. They then brought the screen back out and tried to show Karen that they can totally see all her baby stats on any monitor, so there was no reason for this outburst. I wish I could say this was the last time she freaked out about this, but she pulled this same kind of stunt almost every time I tried to snuggle my baby, until her baby was finally discharged a week later. But seeing the look of shock on her face when I just forced everyone to look at my boobs is probably going to make me giggle every time I think of it. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Hopeful2469. It says, "As a NICU doctor, that mom's behavior wouldn't fly in most places I've worked. Either the nurse in charge or attending should have taken her aside and explained that rudeness to parents or staff wouldn't be tolerated. And if she has a concern, she needs to raise it politely with the nurse looking after her baby. I've worked in several places that have a yellow card, red card system. First episodes of rudeness, inappropriate behavior gets you a warning. Second gets you a yellow card. That may mean some visiting restrictions, and also that further actions will have you banned. Red card gets you banned for visiting. It's exceptionally rare that parents are ever completely banned, especially from somewhere like a NICU, where parents are a key part of the baby's development. But I have come across it on 1 or 2 occasions. Usually, the restrictions and showing that you mean business are enough to bring people back into the realms of reasonable and appropriate behavior, before it gets to the complete banning stage. Sorry you experienced this, but well done for dealing with it, and congrats on your little one." I agree with this commenter that this woman was not handled properly by the staff in that NICU. But I also want to comment that I don't think we should be calling this woman Karen right away. She is in the hospital with her baby in a NICU. She's going through one of the most stressful times of her life. It is extremely scary having a child staying in the NICU. I know this from experience. And different people handle that stress in very different ways. So I'd say the major issue in this story was with the way that the staff handled the situation, and not with the lady we're calling Karen herself. This story comes to us from Dry Lawyer 1931, A New Start. I worked for a company for 20 years and was in lower management, and the company had been taken over. So we went from a local company who cared for the staff to a big worldwide one. If I say so myself, I was good at my job as I had been doing it since I left school and knew lots of people in the industry, and also had a good memory for the product, so would get calls from other stores. We did not get pay raises, and they cut our bonuses, so we went from the best paid to the worst paid. The company struggled to get staff, but my department was fully staffed, even though some they could have got paid more working for someone else. They said they liked having me as a boss, and I would look after them with the odd lunch paid out of my own pocket. The company made good profits, and the upper management did well out of it, with bonuses more than my annual wage. However, the pressure was increasing with more expected all the time, working long hours, up to 60 hours, and some of those unpaid, and working in an outdated facility which would become unbearably hot during summer. If you complained about wages or conditions, they often would tell the staff, if you don't like it, find another job. Many did just that, but I stayed out of some misguided loyalty. I got furloughed for part of the COVID, and my health and well-being had improved while I was not there, but started to go downhill when I returned. I went for a few job interviews, but within the same sort of job. I realized I did not want to do that sort of work anymore, even when I was offered the jobs. People at other stores at the same level started to retire, as they had enough too. By chance, a local job came up doing something with much less hours, and the pay was slightly less, but I would save on fuel as I could walk to work. And totally different to what I had done, but I had the skills they needed. In the end, I got the job and handed in my notice. At first, they tried to persuade me to stay and then work extra notice, but I said no and reminded them of all the times they had told staff, if you do not like it, leave. I let it be known indirectly that if they made it difficult to leave, I would cause a fuss with HR, and none of the bosses wanted that. They then decided to recruit a replacement for me, and I helped with the first interviews and found someone who could do the job. But another manager did not want him, as he decided he wanted his friend to join. My boss told one of the staff that they never thought I would leave, even though I had said I had enough a few times. How wrong they were. So I left and my replacement joined, and since then, the staff I trained have left too, causing them a lot of issues. The customers complain about the service and that he knows nothing about the products. A few people had my mobile and were shocked when they rang up, only for me to tell them I do not work there anymore. I had a pay rise after 6 months at my new company, my mental health has been good, and I'm on more money than for all the heck I had to put up with before. And I found out my replacement took the job on more money than me, or he would not go there. I wish I had done it sooner. I think a lot of managers out there assume that their employees need the jobs a lot more than they actually do. So when they make a comment to an employee like, if you don't like it, find another job, they don't think that the employee's just going to up and leave. Managers, be careful what you tell people because they just might do exactly what you say. If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to the favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.